In the last video, we started adding a form to our greeter component. And the form prints a little input box and a button to the screen, and when you click it, it alerts the value you typed. And this is fine when you're working with the input handling side of things, but in this case, we want our component to maintain some sort of state. And this state is going to be the name that was entered in there and should be displayed up here. There's two types of data in a component. There's props, which we already explored, and there's state. Props get passed into a component as you initialize it. So down here, we initialize greeter with the name prop. State is internally maintained and updated by the component. So a component shouldn't update its own props, but it is allowed to update its own state. So to kick things off, what we're going to do is set things up. So when I type a name in here like Mike and hit the button, Mike shows up here instead of it printing in an alert. To get started, we're going to use a method that's built into React called getInitialState. It's going to pass an anonymous function to it, and that anonymous function doesn't need to take any arguments. And getInitialState is very similar to getDefaultProps. And by similar, I mean it returns an object, and that object gets set to this .state. What I'm going to do in here is return an object, and the only state we're going to maintain for now is going to be name, and I'm going to set it equal to this.props.name. So what we're telling our component to do is this. Hey, you know that you're going to get a name prop no matter what. It's either going to get passed in or it's going to be defaulted to React. Now that's fine, the prop's cool, but what I want you to do as a component is to maintain a name state that you can change yourself. And this is the important distinction. A component can't update props, so we want to use state for the name since we're going to be letting a user update it. From here, what we want to do, instead of having name equal this.props.name, we want to have it equal this.state.name. And at this point, I can save our project, refresh the browser, and you can see the basic functionality is still there. Hello Andrew prints to the screen. Although typing in a name and hitting the button still doesn't do anything. I just wanted to make sure we didn't break the program, and we didn't. GetInitialState returns an object with the name attribute, and we access it down here via this.state.name. Now, setting a state is a little more complex. It requires us to call a function. We can't just update the value of this.state.name like this. This.state.name equals name. That might seem like it's going to work, but it's not going to work. In order for React to re-render the component, we need to call setState. And the reason we want to call setState is so, one, we can set a new value for name, and two, we can re-render our component if our component depends on the name state, which it does. So to do that, we're going to call this.setState, and setState takes an object, kind of like the one we returned here. It's only going to set the state of the attributes you provide. So for now, we're only going to update name because it's the only one we have, and we're going to set it equal to the name variable, which we have right here. I'm going to go ahead and remove my alert and save the file. So let's break down the flow again. The props get defined. It either defaults to the one passed in or to React. GetInitialState sets its name state to the props value. Then down in our render function, we use this.state.name to fetch the value, and we display it to the screen right here. When a user submits the form, we call this.setState, which is going to update the state and re-render the parts of the component that matter. And that's another cool thing. Let's go ahead and refresh the browser. I'm going to type Jen in the box, hit enter, and you can see right here, Jen prints to the screen. And this is fantastic. We now have a component that knows how to update its own state using setState. So if a user interacts with it, we can update the data in it. I could change Jen to Mike, hit enter, and hello Mike prints to the screen. You'll also notice that the value inside of the text box didn't get removed. The component isn't completely re-rendered. React is very smart at figuring out which parts of your component's DOM are going to change, and in this case it found out that the input field itself doesn't depend on the this.state.name property, so it only updated our h1 tag. Now it would be nice to be able to clear the value from here, and we can do that inside of Atom. Inside of our on button click callback, we're going to switch things up a little bit. I'm going to set name equal to this.refs.name. Then just below, I'm going to call this.refs.name.value equals an empty string, just like this. And with this in place, I should be able to refresh my browser, type a name in, hit set name, and you can see hello Mike prints to the screen and our input box gets emptied. All right, that's been a quick introduction to state. Remember, state can be updated by your components. So if you're confused if something should be a prop or a state, just ask yourself that question. Is my component going to be updating the value? Before I wrap this video up, I want to point out one issue that you may have found yourself. If I type nothing in the box and hit enter, or click the set name button, you can see our component is rendering itself with bad data. We shouldn't allow the state to be an empty string, which is what it currently is. Over in Atom, we're going to make a few changes to our on button click method. The first thing I want to do is pull out our reference into its own variable, because the code is starting to get a bit repetitive. Var name ref equals this.refs.name. Then we're going to fetch the name itself. We can keep what we have for the most part, only instead of referencing this.refs.name, we can simply call nameRef.value. Up next, instead of calling this.refs.name, we'll replace it with nameRef. And the last thing we want to do is check if the name variable is a string and its length is greater than 0. So to do that, I'm going to say if type of name is equal to string and name.length is greater than 0. If that is the case, then we have valid data, and I'm fine calling this.setState. If it's not the case, for the moment, we're not going to have an else clause, so nothing is going to happen. We'll simply give the user an opportunity to try again. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save my file and refresh the browser. And we see we have hello Andrew. I'll type Mike. We get hello Mike, and then I'll hit enter or click set name with nothing in the input field. And you can see the program stays the way it was. All right, we now have some good data checking. We also have our set state call, which updates the state and re-renders the component. That is it for this video. I'll see you next time.